Hello and welcome to the White Dog Garage YouTube channel. My name is Bob. This is the third and final of a three-part series on building a router table. In the first part, I modified a plunge router to work on a router table. In the second part, I built the carcass of the router table. And in this, the third part, I finished off the table with such things as drawers, safety switch, dust collection. I'm about to clean it up and finish it off, so while I'm doing that, please see what I've done for part 3 and I'll meet you at the end.
My first job is to fit a T-track to the fence. After determining where the T-track will go, I then mark the area that I will need to route out. This T-track is an afterthought on my part, and I need to shift 4 screws to a higher position to fit it. So as not to disturb the alignment of the fence, I leave the existing screws in place, drive other screws in the new positions, and then remove the old ones. I then use a 10mm square shoulder bit in my Makita trim router to make the recess for the T-track. I do this in 2 passes, followed by 2 spring cuts. Back in the workshop, I mark the length of T-track that I will need, and then cut it to length with a hacksaw before finishing the cut end with a file. Then with the help of a rubber hammer, I refit the T-track to the fence and screw it into place. The screws I use are too long and I have to remove the protruding ends. I do that with a 100mm cut-off wheel on a grinder, but have to resort to a 25mm cut-off wheel on a Dremel to get at one that is too close to a web section. This router table is a budget build, and to make the T-bolts I am modifying the heads of 2 cup head bolts. I do this with a file, mainly because this allows me to creep up on the final size. The bolts are galvanised and will be fitted with wing nuts. I want the action to be smooth and quick, and to ensure this I run a die nut down the thread. My next job is to make the dust collection manifold. First I am fashioning a cowl for this purpose, and I am using a piece of 0.9mm thick sheet metal. Having found the square side, I then mark off the width that I will need and take it over to the guillotine and cut it off. Back at the bench, I then mark off the length that I will need, as well as the positions of 2 45-degree bends that I will have to make, and then I return to the guillotine and press brake to form it up. Happy with the final shape of the cowl, I mark and drill a series of holes where I want the screws to go that will hold it on to the fence. I use a hole saw to drill a hole both in the cowl and in a piece of wood. The wood will mount on top of the cowl to hold the dust extraction hose. Having marked out an octagon around the hole in the wood, I cut this out on the bandsaw and then round the top edge on the router table. To mount the octagon on the cowl, I use screws driven from the underside. For ease of use, and I guess my safety, I've mounted an emergency stop switch to the front of the cabinet and drilled a hole in the back panel for the power lead to pass through. I originally planned to have a single large drawer on each side of the cabinet. However, I subsequently decided I would prefer 2 per side, and here I am fitting a second set of slider rails. Looking through my offcuts for suitable wood to use to make the drawers, I noticed that I have a lot of melamine laminated panel offcuts. I don't like working with this stuff normally, but it would work for these drawers and at the same time reduce the amount. So I use it to cut out the sides and ends for 4 drawer boxes. I then use the router to machine out recesses in the long sides. I'm using an 18mm bit in a number of passes and also at 2 depths of 4 and the final depth of 8mm to make the recess. Finally, I use a 1/4" slot router bit to cut a recess on all 4 sides of each drawer box to take the base. Off camera, I have also cut out 4 drawer fronts using 12mm thick plywood, and here I use the router table to round over all 4 corners on each piece. Then it is on to assembling the drawers. Off camera I also cut the 4 plywood bases for the drawers. The drawers will be held together with a mixture of glue and screws, and my first job is to drill and countersink holes in the long sides that the screws will pass through. Then it is on to assembly. With the drawer boxes done, I've moved to fitting the drawer fronts. Here I use packers to get the spacing right, and double-sided tape then to hold the drawer fronts in place so that I can drill and fix them in place with screws. I am also fitting a round knob to each drawer front. With all the structural work done on the cabinet, I'm now moving on to the painting stage. After removing the drawers and hardware, I have sealed the plywood ends with a 2-part filler. Once the filler has set, I move on to sanding. I'm removing the excess filler with an 80 grit disc and then went over the cabinet with, in succession, 120 grit, 240 grit and a worn out 240 grit sanding discs. I coated the tabletop, fence front and bottom and the 4 drawer fronts with a marine grade clear polyester varnish. I masked the varnish surfaces with tape and paper and then painted the remainder of the router bench and fence, first with a primer and then 2 coats of white acrylic paint.
All done. What do you think? I've got drawers. I've got a safety switch. I have got dust extraction. I've got an extra T-track so that I can mount attachments on the front of the fence. I'm very pleased with it. As you saw, I used it during the video to make things like the drawer carcasses, and overall I think I'll get a lot of use out of it, and you'll no doubt see it again in future videos. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click like and share it amongst your friends. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you do, don't forget to ding the bell so that you're sent a reminder from YouTube every time a new video comes out. Thank you.